Hello and welcome again to Control F, the NSI Cyber and Tech Centers podcast. This season, we're bringing you a series of sessions from one of the nation's leading cyber events, the National Cyber Innovation Forum. My name is Andrew McClure, the president of the National Cyber Innovation Forum. And in this episode, we dive into a conversation with the Chief Investment Officer and Managing Director of Paladin Capital, Steed, the Chief Information Officer of IonQ, Katie Arrington, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the Department of War, Honorable Ben Kohlmann, the Principal Cyber Advisor of the Army, Honorable Brandon Pugh, and the Chief Security Officer of Huntress Labs, Eric Stride. Stay tuned for a conversation about how emerging technology and the workforce that designs, deploys, and sustains them are shaping battlefield advantage, sustaining an energy renaissance, advancing collective defense. Panelists will explore quantum readiness, cyber resilience, securing critical infrastructure, and the talent and acquisition reforms needed to maintain America's technological edge.
All right, everybody. We're going to go off into our next session here. We've got an interesting conversation for this panel called Cyber, Quantum, AI, and the Workforce to Win. So we have Katie Arrington, Eric Stride, Ben Kohlmann, Brandon Pugh, moderated by Steed. So the Honorable Katie Arrington is now the Chief Information Officer at IonQ, a quantum security company, and most recently she was performing the duties of the Department of War's Chief Information Officer. We have Eric Stride, who is the Chief Security Officer at Huntress Labs, where he oversees the company's global security operations, global support, adversary tactics, and internal security infrastructure. On stage also is the Honorable Ben Kohlmann. Mr. Kohlmann is the Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the Department of War, and he was sworn in as the 20th Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Manpower and Reserve Affairs last December, and he is responsible for the oversight of Manpower and Reserve Component Affairs. The Honorable Brandon Pugh is the Principal Cyber Advisor over at the U.S. Army, and he advises the Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, on all cyber matters, including readiness, budget, capabilities, and strategy. And this panel is moderated by Steed of Paladin Capital. So Chris, please take it from here.
Great, thank you, Andrew. All right, great, thank you, Andrew. And so we've got a pretty broad set of topics here and a lot of ground to cover with a great set of panelists. So let's jump right in with something very simple and easy to understand, quantum. So Katie, let's start with you. So IonQ is in a dead sprint towards Q-Day, both in terms of enabling stable quantum computing as well as applying quantum methods and algorithms on top of antiquated digital infrastructure, advanced digital infrastructure, and new rapidly advancing AI infrastructure, all of which has its foundations in the digital, physical, and human elements that define the cyberspace domain, cutting across all other domains and the 16-plus verticals of critical infrastructure. So it's a tall order, to say the least, but it's one that has an achievable outcome. And so, in your view, how will quantum reshape national security? And what preparations should government and industry be making today, both in terms of tools and technologies, as well as human talent to support the effort?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me today, and I applaud you for saying that so quickly without water, so congratulations. How many people here actually understand quantum? Raise your hand. Do you need a job? So I will say that my career history has been that I've been on the industry side and I've gone into government because I've seen what's coming. So if you look back to 2019, I was screaming about cybersecurity. 2020, I was screaming about supply chain. And in the department, the last round, and this poor gentleman had to sit in DMAGs and listen to me scream about cryptology and what we weren't doing. What quantum is going to do to the world is change it fundamentally. Everything, every aspect about your life will change when quantum becomes a commercially available capability. How it will change the Department of War will be fundamentally completely different than the way we operate now. Questions that we ask ourselves that take scientists years, hundreds of years, to get answers to. equations, computations. With the quantum computer, they are solved in seconds because it's just beyond what a GPU can do. Take one GPU times 1,000,000 and you put it in front. So everyone knows basic encryption, right? We all remember RSA encryption. And when RSA started, 30 years ago-ish? They said, oh, the mathematical equation, you won't be able to break that. Well, quantum computers can and will break basic level encryption. So what does that mean? Everything that is unencrypted or has been encrypted, all of that passive data the department's been catching, just like our adversaries though, for years, they'll have the ability to decrypt, and now we have AI, what we will be able to understand about what our adversaries have been doing for 30 years and what they intend on doing. We will be able to use quantum sensing, quantum networking, quantum timing in correlation with quantum computing so that we'll be able to have a higher fidelity of sensing. We'll be able to have atomic clocks that can be totally disconnected like a submarine and have no latency and can be completely taken over. And even if there was no atomic clock in the Naval Observatory, an atomic clock with quantum would have no latency and be able to be in a GPS-denied environment. So it really is something that is fundamentally going to change the world. With that, I say, it's fundamentally going to change the world, and it's a working sector, a tech sector, that is just coming online. So as the world is building data centers, imagine a computer the size of this little bit of the stage that plugs into the wall, that doesn't take any more natural resources than playing a stereo system. That's what quantum is, because it's cooled by cryogenics inside the computer. It doesn't need the water. It doesn't need the energy. So big use cases that we're using right now, like the state of Tennessee, bought a quantum computer, and they are optimizing the grid. They're taking the quantum computer to figure out how far in advance can they plan the flow of power to save money. They're using it for traffic patterns so that people aren't wasting money at stop signs and stoplights with gas. It's overhauling. Think about how pharmaceuticals and chemical compounds will take seconds for us to derive whether it's going to be a useful medication or not, and we don't need to do human trials. So it's going to change the world. But the Department of Defense, I joke around, but I'm dead serious, we'll be able to look on a gnat on a dog's rear in China in the coming years. And that's something we haven't been able to say.
Yeah, understood. And you talked about post-quantum cryptography. What sectors would you say are the ones that most urgently need to start to deploy post-quantum cryptography inside of their networks?
Everyone should be doing post-quantum today. You should be on it now, because these lovely human beings here plan 5 years in advance. If they're not buying quantum computers or have PQC already going, you're behind the 8 ball, because within the year, 18 months, we're going to hit what everyone refers to as Q-Day. We were able to hit 256 qubits. When that happens, think about anything that was encrypted with basic encryption. So if I'm my adversary, how do I use it? Do I just turn the lights off? Now think about that. This is every sector in the country has to have quantum on the top of there, and it should be in the C-suite. I know that each one of these gentlemen, I know Brandon, I know the Honorable, when we were in the department, we talked about it continuously, because we've got to be able to figure, how do we plan for it? How are we going to use it? What is our roadmap? And most companies have said it's like voodoo. They don't really understand that quantum is a real thing. It is a very real thing, but there's no second place in quantum. If China beats us to it, there's no second place. So we must beat China in the quantum race. And I'm excited to work at the company that I'm with, but I will say my biggest passion for this is I want to give all of them the capability, ultimately, and this is selfishly, not IonQ, this is Katie Arrington, a grandmother of 4, a lover of my country. I love ordering Chinese food. I do. I love Chinese food. Movie Grandpa is my best friend. What I don't want to do is have a gun held to my head and have to order it in Mandarin. So I'm going to work my butt off every day to make sure that these people have the capability to defeat the adversary before the adversary can defeat me.
No, it's a great statement. And on that point, why don't we jump over to Brandon? So, Brandon, you just came back from the Defense Critical Infrastructure Summit at Fort Bragg. You've made defending homeland critical infrastructure a top priority for your office and have stated that this is a no-fail mission, a national security imperative, and that critical infrastructure resilience is a strategic imperative and not just a back-office function. And so from your perspective, what does this new pervasive battlefield look like, and what are the biggest challenges the Army faces when it comes to defense critical infrastructure?
Well, Chris, thanks for having me. It's nice to see many friendly faces in the audience, and well, thanks for watching the press conference, as I could tell, because you got some good quotes there. But on a serious note, so my office is fairly unique. I've only been in the office for actually coming on a year now. So I have cyber, electronic warfare, and information operations. But about a month ago, Secretary Driscoll had appointed me to be his secretariat lead and oversight for critical infrastructure, both cyber and physical. And I think it was in recognition that DCI is a no-fail mission for the department. So in a time of conflict, how are we making sure we can always move people and equipment? And that's a mission we can't fail at. We have certain units that have to be able to move people in a matter of hours, and we can't have a physical, cyber, or even just an accidental actor be the barrier to that. So what we found, though, is many well-intentioned efforts to get after DCI, but sometimes they weren't integrated. We weren't fully syncing with interagency partners. That's what my role is looking to do. So just about a week ago at Fort Bragg, we brought 14 leaders together, all of our interagency leaders. I know Nick was on stage today and was too kind to give me a plug for that. Energy, all of our utility leaders, in conjunction with DOW and Army leaders, to really drive home the importance of DCI, but more importantly, look at that path forward. So we're coming out with a DCI playbook to guide our 288 camps, posts, and stations in the Army that we hope will even benefit the broader community. I'd say what was most helpful, though, is just the relationships we built. As simple as just getting these leaders in the room that all were at the principal or the deputy level that could commit their organizations was a tremendous success. I'd say it really starts at the top. The President's cyber strategy drove home not just the importance of critical infrastructure, but for one of the first times specifically called out DCI, and that's something my boss, Secretary Driscoll, has really continued in the Army.
Yeah, understood. And so you just ran Army's AI tabletop exercise 2.0 at the Pentagon in late April. There were 14 senior execs. There was AWS, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto Networks, and many others. And so 3 weeks later, what are your key takeaways? And you've stated in a number of interviews that one of your key goals is to get new capabilities into the warfighter's hands in weeks. And so what did the Army learn it needs from AI for cyber defense?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. This really gets at a model that my boss loves, which is just getting the right people in the room and having a frank conversation. We've done this multiple times now with significant success. Starting back last fall, the Secretary and I was one of the people in the room that helped execute this. We brought 15 CEOs. It had to be the CEOs themselves of our international companies to the Pentagon around AI challenges. We replicated that about a month ago, specifically for AI for cyber, in recognition that sometimes we just see AI as an enterprise function, just helping us our daily tasks. But as we all know, the tremendous value it has for AI defense as well as AI offense, and we don't have all the answers in the military. But collaboratively we do between the military and industry, and that's exactly what we did. Brought 14 C-suite leaders of not just vendors. We were very careful to just bring international companies that have complicated networks just like the Army, and also have found solutions ready to learn from them. In terms of lessons learned, now it's a sprint. We found 3 capabilities we're going to be prototyping and piloting, but in advance of that, we didn't want this to be a conversation. We pre-aligned funding and pre-aligned units to field them, so that way we can sprint and have these pilots and prototypes underway in a matter of weeks, hopefully. But that's just part of where we see the Army going overall. Something my boss has championed is called Army Continuous Transformation. That's not just a marketing term. That is really how we transform the entire Army for the future battlefield, one of which is largely here now. A part of that, to your point, though, was around acquisition reform. No secret that the military is not known for bringing things in quickly. That is something that our secretary, as well as Secretary Hegseth, has just said is unacceptable. We need capabilities in the hands of soldiers, especially when it's tech and cyber, in a matter of weeks. Not years. And then equally as important, we need the soldiers to actually touch the product early on. Let's not wait 2 or 3 years, go through an acquisition cycle just to find out that it's outdated or not what we actually need. So one of the initiatives I am super excited about is something we call Army Fuse. It falls under a broader umbrella called PIT, but essentially that's to bring a capability, put it in the hands of soldiers in 30 to 45 days. And that is something the Secretary is really holding us accountable to, and that is lightning speed. But equally as important is this shouldn't just be our biggest companies. We want small VC-backed companies with 3 and 4 people to have a clear pathway into the Army, not just the world's largest. I think we need a healthy balance.
No, I think that makes sense for so many AI-native startups and entrepreneurs that even if they never worked in government or military, they are coming to the forefront and they want to defend. And we've been talking about, these are the operators that have been in the front lines inside of corporate environments, fighting off nation states. They're looking to come to the fight.
Exactly, and it's what's really cool is just the number of really small companies that have some of the most innovative products. And historically, they may have no clue how to enter the front door into the Pentagon, let alone the Army. That needs to change. They need to come quickly and realize that if you have a niche product, we need to get that here quickly. That is our competitive advantage, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great perspective, Brandon, and thank you for that. So let's go from land to sea. So Ben, you're responsible for the Navy's people, and the Navy needs cyber operators, quantum literate scientists, and AI engineers. So how are things like AI, cyber, autonomy, robotics, the list goes on, changing naval warfare and operational readiness? And how are you addressing the challenges that Navy faces in terms of how it recruits, retains, and develops that talent?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I want to start with an experience, an anecdote that maybe showcases the flip side of where we need to go. The Department of Navy recently ran a data challenge where we put out an opportunity for folks in the fleet and folks in the civilian workforce to form self-assembled teams to solve manpower problems, gave them access to a lot of our systems, and with that they could run analytics and do AI stuff. There was the third place winning team I talked to last week, a bunch of GS-11s, so probably early to late 20s in their career. There's their frontline supervisors, GS-13, actually initially said, no, you can't work on this. We have too many other things for you to focus on. And one of the supervisors actually piled more work onto this person, and these 3 people ended up finding ways outside to run these extracurricular challenges, but they ended up solving a really hard problem for us. And so part of it is cultural. that we do put a lot of expectations and workload on our people, we also have to recognize that exceptional outcomes are going to come from exceptional people doing really interesting things. I think one of the lessons of the Ukraine war was not just the technology and the drones, but it was the people on the front lines who made all those technology changes. Every day, as these people were being beset by attacks, they were having to make technology changes. They had the right to repair, I'll put it that way, on the battlefield of Ukraine, to add a sensor, to add fiber optic lines, to put in new approaches and new propulsion techniques. These were people who made these choices, who then had the technical acumen to actually make those changes and iterate. And so when we talk about technology, we also have to realize all technology is in service to humans and warfighting outcomes. And so our mindset has to shift towards that solution. The other thing I think about a lot is incentive alignment. One of the biggest challenges we have on both the military and the civilian side is our cyber workforce. And the Navy has, we have a cyber warfare path, but the way that we recruit and retain these people in particular is not aligned with their opportunities on the outside world. You know, the GSA system and even the military enlisted and officer rank pay scales are nowhere near what these folks make on the outside. So we have to think about new solutions that patriotic people can come in and solve our problems. I think this is where the reserves come into play, where a lot of these exceptional operators can work for private companies, get their worth, but they also want to spend their time doing national security issues. How do we think about reshaping the reserve forces to ensure we're bringing this talent in, giving them an opportunity to thrive, and not, you know, repressing them with an immense amount of admin work that they don't experience on the outside world. They come in the Navy, they come in the Marine Corps, and they realize, man, I'm spending 50% of my time on paperwork. So we have a lot of work to do. I think there's a recognition in the department that we have to get after it. If we can just empower our talent to solve our problems and identify that, we're going to be in a great spot.
Got it. And you've said on both sides. So you were a venture investor in dual use, and now you are the Navy senior workforce official. What does the private sector need to better understand for what the department actually needs from talent?
Well, I'll start on the product side. I think we talk about speed to execution and speed to fleet, and we certainly want to get technologies into the hands of warfighters quickly. But at the end of the day, we need something that works the first time, immediately when we need it. And you look at a lot of the new products that are emerging, these have taken 5-10 years to develop because they're going through a crucible-based, market-forced iteration approach. And by the time they get to, the random person in the middle of America, they're pretty refined. We want new technology and new weapon systems, but when I get the order to go and do a surface attack or attack on land or whatever, I can't have it fail. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen in order to make that work. When it comes to talent, I think it's realizing that the incentives for promotion in the military and the civilian world are different than what drives outcomes in the private sector. The other thing, too, is a lot of our military folks, necessarily based on our career paths, have to transition every 2 to 3 years. So if you're a private sector person trying to build engagement with the government, whereas on the commercial side, you might have a vice president who then fleets up to SVP, and it's been a 5, 6, 7-year relationship. On the military side, if your champion is an 04, 05, 06 level person, they may only be there 3 years. That next 06 who comes in, they're going to have no context on your product. So how fast can you convince them or showcase them you are solving a deeply felt problem that they have, so that on day one they can pick it up? And this is where integrating who are the long-term civilians who have been there, how do you build those champions, in addition to the folks who are on the front lines, bringing that insight back, really understand what the decision cycle and career cycles are of your champions to know how much groundwork and work you have to lay from the outset.
Got it. It's really interesting. So let's go over to Eric. We've heard about the challenges that a large publicly traded company focused on quantum is facing. We've heard about the challenges at Army and Navy. So Huntress Labs, they run a 24/7 SOC at scale across small and medium-sized organizations and critical service providers, many of whom just simply do not have the resources or access to talent to defend themselves in cyberspace against a ever-increasing growing cohort of threat actors and a barrage of advanced attacks. So as attackers adopt AI and automation, and we've heard a lot about that today, how is the cybersecurity profession changing, and what lessons from defending thousands and thousands of organizations can be applied to protecting critical infrastructure, or defense critical infrastructure, and then defense systems themselves?
No, thank you, Chris. Happy to be here. As you stated, right, Huntress is protecting over 250,000 organizations worldwide. So we see a lot of this. We have real-world examples from thousands of engagements. And from my team's perspective, the attacker that we are facing today is very different than the attacker we were facing 2 years ago, right? Attackers are adopting AI at a pace that is very, very rapid, using it in every aspect of their attack chain, their tactics, their techniques, their procedures, to reduce the time from initial exploitation to creating effects. And so we see it with, phishing, right? What used to take, probably hours to put together and maybe didn't have great grammar is now in minutes or less and has perfect grammar, and they're watching your LinkedIn if it's targeted, and they're making it so that it's something that resonates with you and makes it more likely that you're going to click on the link, right? Malware, we see modifications to malware happening in hours instead of weeks. We see when new patches come out that those are reversed and exploits are written very, very rapidly. And so the old model of just kind of watching the dashboard and waiting for an incident to happen, it's really dead, right? We have to be engaging AI from a defensive perspective in order to keep up and thwart the attackers who are leveraging at a very rapid scale. For us, within my Security Operations Center, we've embraced this. We are using AI, agentic investigative workflows in order to do the enrichment, to do some of the initial investigation, where we've been able to make the investigation very repeatable and deterministic. It actually will carry it all the way through, but we do this in a very AI-powered, expert-led. I think that's important because humans are great at stuff that the AI isn't, right? So the context, the judgment, the decision within ambiguity is something that the humans can kind of plug in there that the AI workflows really can't do well. And so that combination, I think, is key. We're seeing that even with some of the AI native companies that are coming out. Some are like, oh, we can do AI for all of this automatically, right? And then you see they're a few months in, and if you go look at their job postings, they're hiring a bunch of humans to augment, right? And so that AI-powered expert-led, I think, is key for the defensive position. I know there's a little bit of fear in the workforce too that, hey, AI is taking, these human jobs. And while we are compressing a little bit of the workforce at the front with AI doing some of the automation, and we got to be very careful with burnout, taking out the folks that have been there a while. What we're seeing really, though, is that the workforce is evolving, right? Today, many security operations centers have humans looking at this, right? They're going to modify like we have to having agentic workflows doing the investigation. Well, the humans then, they become that escalation point for the things that the AI can't make a determination on. They become more of the QA, QC, quality management. They become the process drivers for the AI, right? And that enables them to spend more time doing investigative research on the new tactics, techniques, and procedures that the adversaries are using and plug that back into the AI, right? And so this is an evolution, just like many others. The roles of the humans aren't going to be eliminated, they're going to evolve, right? And so we're embracing that pretty heavily. Some of the lessons that we've learned is, I think was the second part of your question, looking at all of these, small and medium-sized businesses, is that frequently visibility is a problem, right? It's really hard to defend things you can't see, that you don't know about, right? Endpoints that don't have agents on their identities that aren't monitored, logs that nobody is looking at, right? If you're collecting the logs but nobody's looking at it or no system's looking at it, right, then what good is it, right? And so that visibility problem is very prevalent in our clients, and so it's obviously an area we push them on very hard. Another lesson is complexity is a challenge here, right? If you have 8, 10, 12 different tools that don't communicate, that don't provide input into a common operating picture, it's really hard to fully understand your threat landscape, and the attackers take advantage of that, right? They find the areas that you're not covering, right, the seams between those tools, and they'll exploit that. And then the last is, speed determines outcomes. So everybody's heard it's not if you'll get breached, it's when you'll get breached. I say it's not just when you get breached, it's what you do when that happens. How do you react? How fast do you react, right? The difference between a breach that is minor, that you've eradicated, and a breach that is very catastrophic to your organization is probably on the order of minutes, right? Maybe hours if you're lucky. And so having that ability to respond, to exercise, what are you going to do? And for critical infrastructure, this is huge, right? If their IR plan is sitting in a notebook on the shelf collecting dust, they've already failed, right? Because you have to exercise it, you have to know what you're going to do, you have to practice it. If you're not doing that all the time, you're going to lose to the attackers.
So it sounds like speed, accuracy, very important, especially in this age of AI, and soon to be the age of quantum and robotics and the space economy. These just keep hitting, and persistent innovation is ultimately what we're all trying to defend here. And so we only have about a minute left or so I just want to do a quick round robin, and we'll just go down the line here. Does the U.S. today have the workforce, institutions, incentives required to maintain its technological edge?
I'll start. I believe unequivocally yes, because America always finds a way to win with the men and women in it. When there's a hard problem to solve, we find the right people to do it. Now, there's work to be done. We have lots of shortages, but the market will force these exceptional people to come to the fore.
So I'm going to second that one. So I don't know anywhere else in the world people come to get an education. I don't know if there's people lining up to go to China, Russia, or Iran, but I know that every U.S. university has at least 30% people that are here on a visa to go to school. So we absolutely have the workforce. Do we have the desire? That's where I think your point, sir, as a former enlisted wife, we moved every 2 years. And that is draining on families. We do need to think about the family structure that supports the warfighter. But I don't know a country where, education is available, the opportunities to create businesses, as both of you at the end of the table, and the thing, yes, we have the capability, and yes, we are the greatest country that ever was or will be, full stop. And if you don't believe that, then you're in the wrong room. That's full stop. We have the capability. We just need to tweak the system to ensure that we have those people that are right, can they either stay for the right reasons, because in the military, you're never going to get paid the money that that you should in the private sector. They want to feel they're incorporated into the mission, that they believe in something, that they're respected and appreciated. And in my industry, quantum, we absolutely have what it takes. That's why we're leading the world.
Yeah, a good reminder I always like to say is that, we can have exquisite tools and capabilities in cyber, but our people are at the core of what we do, not just in cyber, but really the Army overall. Very confident we have the best cyber operators in the world. We always can be more lethal. We need to make sure our training and our recruitment keeps pace, but so far we are doing an exquisite job when it comes to defense and offense against adversaries that seek to do us harm.
Got it. So we are actually out of time, but the headline that I'm taking away here, we've got 3 transformative technologies that are all arriving simultaneously, and it seems like, from what you're saying, the binding constraint is both the technology and the people who can operate them, and that's a procurement problem, it's an education problem, and it's a culture problem all at once, and certainly it's a tough challenge, but with the type of leadership that we've got on this panel and across the nation, I think it's a challenge we'll overcome. Win, baby, win. So please join me in thanking this great panel of experts.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks to Hannah Haynes, Keelan Wolf, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI CTC team in helping us produce today's episode. Be on the lookout every Monday and Wednesday for more sessions from the National Cyber Innovation Forum. If you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks again.